The Persona franchise is one of the few good examples of a spin-off gone right. But did you know that the first two Persona games were also ported for the PSP? The online prices today can go around $200 each. This is Leiroxyyy and here is our review of the PSP versions of Persona 1 and 2. Shin Megami Tensei Persona 1 is the PSP port of the PS1 original that was released in 2009 by Atlus. After the glowing Western success received by Persona 3 and Persona 4 on the PS2, Atlus decided to remake the first game for the new Western fans of the franchise. The story is set somewhere in Tokyo, Japan, and a group of high school teenagers were fooling around with a summoning ritual. Things went horribly wrong after an apparition rendered some of them unconscious. When they woke up, they discovered their abilities to summon their own personal apparitions, or personas. The teenagers used their powers to solve the supernatural occurrences that alter their reality. In-game mechanics of the succeeding games, such as recruiting, training, and fusing personas, is virtually the same in this PSP port. That said, there are no social links yet to explore. The battle system is turn-based as characters are placed on a grid map. The hit detection depends on the range of weapons and the persona's area of attack. One of the things that the PSP port kept from the PS1 original is the method of navigating through certain areas and dungeons. Inside close quarters, the whole scene is in isometric view, but the controls can be counterintuitive based on where the protagonist is facing. When exploring a certain location, the camera goes into a dungeon crawling first-person view that can be confusing, especially if there was no overhead map. It is worth mentioning that the Western team that handled the PS1 port had to cut corners because they were short-staffed. Plus, they feared that the game is so deep into Japanese culture. It might alienate the Western players, so changes had to be made. A major chunk of the game was removed mostly due to these reasons. The team that handled the PSP port wanted to stay true to the Japanese original and reversed the major changes the PS1 team did. The PSP port now has the Snow Queen arc, animated cutscenes, the Japanese-centric narrative, and that signature Persona J-pop music. Shin Megami Tensei Persona 2 Innocent Sin is the PSP remake made by Atlus back in 2011. Coming from the 1999 PS1 original. The port was developed after the good reception of Persona 1 on the PSP. The story takes place in the fictitious city of Sumaru, Japan, involving students from two adjacent high schools. After a fateful confrontation that led them into a dreamlike state, they found out that they can summon creatures called personas. They were told that the city will be in a state of confusion where every story, rumor, and gossip becomes real. Being skeptical at first, they tested the theory by playing a party game called Joker, which led to horrible results. With their given powers, it is up to them to find a way to return everything back to normal. Innocent Sin took everything that the first Persona had and improved it. Getting through places is now in third-person perspective. The battles are still in grid form, and you can still recruit and fuse other personas. Since any rumor becomes truth, the main characters can spread rumors of their own to get necessary equipment, items, and information. There are a lot more locations in the city map to explore as well. This is the first Persona game that would dwell upon the romantic relationships of the male protagonist, even boys love. One flaw that most players noticed is the frequent long loading times in between battles and changing locations. The lack of guidance where to go and what to do next may annoy some inexperienced players. Just like the previous Persona PSP game, the team had to cut corners due to short staffing and technical issues. Even though the game design is better than the first Persona, the overall aesthetic may not have pushed the graphical capability of the PSP. The sequel Eternal Punishment was also excluded in the UMD due to lack of disk capacity. Despite of developmental issues mentioned, Atlus did give more budget to the PSP release. They included a second animated introductory video, animated cutscenes, good voice acting, and that signature Persona J-pop track.